Dear colleagues, it's already 11:30, which means that you need to come back and we can continue our conference. And we have the next panel discussion, coordination as an important aspect of a survivor-centered approach. And in just a minute, I will present our panelists. Shpyrka is going to moderate, and Vasyl Lutsyk, Ruslan Horyachenko, Iryna Shurkhno, Katarina Черепаха, Anna Sayenko, and Olena Trapeznikova. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I think we can continue. You know, when I was thinking about the topic of this panel, a thought came to my mind about modern business philosophers. And they say that we are going to move in business and big corporations and with the help of teams. And so here we have some powerful big teams, but we will discuss how they can coordinate their efforts and to become these teams of teams on the area of their expertise to be effective. Of course, every organization, institution, or agency, they have their purpose, vision, and they do their job well. This is a must-have to be good. But to achieve better results, they have to cooperate, just to see the whole picture. If we talk about whole picture, I want to start with old Indian fairy tale about blind people and an elephant. That's when blind people were standing around the elephant, and each person touched elephant on different sides. Some could feel the tail, some the trunk, some their body. So some of them said that this was just a rope. Some said that they were touching a tree. Some said that they were touching the wall. And they were all right, because they had limited access to information. And then there are two endings of the story. One, they got together after that and they tried to convince each other, and they just had a fight and split up. The other ending is that they tried to share all the information, and this way they put the whole elephant together. So they build a dialogue. And this dialogue, that's the reason why we got together here for these 2 days. And the topic of dialogue, coordination, cooperation, these are the key words. It doesn't have to be a friendly dialogue. It can be some big fight, as long as we are all at the same table and we all discuss this important topic together. And hopefully this fight will lead to some result. Let's start with our first speaker. And I made this joke before. It's great that you have the shortest position out of all panelists. So Vasyl Lutsyk, the head of Social Service of Ukraine. Over to you. Thank you very much, Mr. Roman, for this wonderful introduction to our discussion, because we cannot coordinate without a dialogue. And so the more effective we are when we have dialogue, the better coordination is. And when we talk about the role of social service in this cooperation, according to the legislation, is on the Ministry of Social Policy, but we are the agency of the ministry, so we play a certain role as well. When we say about our role, we start to develop certain directions this year. So these are the control functions of all services which are provided in the area of GBV. If we talk about this activity, one of the important aspects of our activity, that's improving professional skills of the workers of these centers, because we have turnover and we have additional challenges of the wartime. We need to keep the necessary level of knowledge of those people who have contact with victims and survivors. And for that reason, we organized a lot of education and training events with ourselves and in support with our Ukrainian partners like UrFem and international partners. And we had a common training with the School of Public Management. So we work together to get some knowledge on this topic. And we understand that we need to have certain registries of people who had gone through these trainings to understand how many people in our state we can engage in the topic of GBV. Also, we need to unify training materials so that we can have a comprehensive curriculum to cover all their needs and challenges, especially during the wartime. The next message that I want to deliver to all of you is that now we have almost 900 services which help victims. Here we are talking about mobile teams, shelters, service centers, and on our website you can find a list, but there is a problem. Because if we talk about all the agencies and institutions which were created by the state, we know all of them, but also there are centers which were created with support of our international partners, and we don't receive information directly. So I ask everyone in this room, please inform us about a certain service or venue where the services can be provided so that we add it to the list and people have information about it. Another achievement of this year, we had a big survey with more than 1,000 respondents about the quality of social services which are provided by the Center of Supporting Survivors. And the majority of people who had direct contact with the center, they are quite satisfied, but almost 10% who got rejected. And sometimes this rejection is not fully justified, because if we look at why this rejection was provided, it just shows that low level of professionalism of people. And sometimes people are just rejected, but sometimes this rejection leads to some dire consequences. I think you all know about this case, but a wrong social service was provided to a survivor, which led that survivor was killed. And so it could have been prevented if emergency intervention was provided rather than some long-term support offered. So we need to unify our approaches to the standards of social services. We need to include all the providers of services into the registry, because this way we can control the quality of the services. Also, when we are talking about our activity in combating GBV, we need to focus on these new challenges during the war, because when we worked in peaceful conditions, challenges were different, approaches were different, and the way how we trained our personnel and the way how we worked with our survivors. We need to, of course, pay special attention to the areas which are closer to the front line or near occupation. And to sum up, I would like to state that if you communicate properly, if you organize events like this on a regular basis, and here it's important to work on the level of region, on the level of community, because here we are mostly on central level. On central level, communication is not that bad. But when we talk about the level of local authorities, local communities, we need this more coordinative role, and we are ready to be that actor who can coordinate this local coordination. And we are ready to engage all stakeholders and respond properly. So thank you for your attention. I will be happy to answer all your questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Vasyl. We understand that social service is a type of a hub where you get all the information, all institutions and agencies which work in this area. And it's great that you say that you are open to something new, to new institutions and venues. And I hope that everyone knows how they can be included into this registry, and you will keep being open so that people can get in touch with you and to be part of this registry. And thank you for mentioning regions, because that's what I'm going to discuss next. Because, of course, we can come up with good theory and even working model here in Kiev, but then when we go to regions, many good ideas are lost. And this idea of coordination is lost, the coordination of civil society and local authorities. So this coordination is not as strong. And I would like to give the floor to the next speaker. Ruslan Horyachenko, the head of Department on Human Rights in the National Police. And I would like you to touch upon these regional policies, how you communicate within National Police locally, who you keep in touch with most, where do you see gaps in this communication, or where do you see barriers for human-centered approach in GBV? And usually a police officer is the first contact who work with victim and survivor. So maybe you understand better what is missing on this first initial stage. Thank you very much for this invitation. It's very pleasant for me to be here and to discuss these issues, because that's what we have in common, and it's extremely relevant. We didn't manage to name our department in a short way, so we have a special sub-department of our department, which has existed for half a year, and our task is promoting projects, also to have some internal investigations, analysis, supervision, to analyze everything that is going on and give recommendations about improving practices in the national police. If some practices work, then scale them up in different regions, and if they don't work, maybe change or eliminate them. And we work with human rights, and our task is to control that human rights are respected. And that's when we talk about human rights, that's where we talk about inclusion, gender equality, domestic violence, and following national and international standards. Also, if we talk about regions, that's what you asked me, this department, we have the Department of the Inspection. So some of them, they work as a part of the local police, but there are some independent officers. They are not accountable to the local police. They are accountable to our department and directly to the head of the National Police. And yesterday you talked to the head of National Police. So the unique situation of this police officer that can be apparent because they can praise or they can punish. And these inspectors, they could activate this cooperation on local levels. It was very pleasant to meet so many people I know. So I came 30 minutes ago, but I needed like 50 minutes to say hello to everyone I know. I see many people that we work with. We implement wonderful projects together, and because these projects are really good to people. And these inspectors made this happen. And now you probably want some example of what I'm talking about. So tomorrow, we have a meeting about Donetsk region. We have our inspector in Donetsk region, and this person has been there since 2014, and he is permanently there in Drushkivka. And an example, so they cooperate with the Alliance of Public Health, and they managed to organize 3 mobile clinics which provide medical assistance to the territory where basically there is nobody else to provide medical assistance. And so tomorrow we are going to have a meeting with the Alliance and with the head of military administration, and we want to discuss these practices, how it works, now often people come to the police, they ask for medical assistance. Unfortunately, there are many communities, they don't have any hospitals or clinics anymore, and they have no access to healthcare. Still, they don't want to leave. There is an aspect of forced evacuation of children, and we work with that in Toretsk, but we cannot force adults, and they just say, I don't want to leave, this is my home, and I'm going to stay. And of course, these people need healthcare services, especially now with no heating, with this cold and all kinds of viruses. So these mobile clinics, they were a very successful pilot, so we are going to scale up this project. And you know the organization of White Angels, these police officers who went through necessary training, also paramedics who went through necessary trainings. I have just come back from this region, so I saw this, and I told the paramedics in this region and called them heroes. And they were surprised to be called heroes, but even though they save lives on a daily basis, but they feel that they just do their job, and it's great, and it works. Also, it's very important to understand where police are, where shelters are, so that we can actually help people, because many people, especially women, they ask about where should I go next, and they usually discuss their further steps with a police officer, because a police officer is the first point of contact, and this woman needs to know where to take her, where to refer her to, so that she can receive necessary services and to continue her life, and not to be scared that this situation will repeat tomorrow again. She needs to feel safe and build her life. We have representatives of La Strada, and we have a wonderful cooperation with them. We have inspections, and basically we collect all the internal investigations, and we cooperate with La Strada because they receive some information on their hotline. We organized some meetings where you told us what you do, and we told you what we do. We saw some overlap and where we can coordinate and cooperate. And it's good that we can communicate and we achieve successes to communicate. So thank you very much. Thank you for real-life examples. And it's always good if we have some success stories. Don't hesitate to share them. But of course, if something doesn't work, this is also the platform where you can speak freely. Because I believe that we are all partners. We all work for the same goal and for the same beneficiaries. And whether this is this conference or this is some smaller meetings, our beneficiary is victim, survivor, witness. It has to be for them, and this dialogue should help them. And I want to thank the National Police for working in these really difficult territories where police are present in those areas where other agencies and services cannot be available. The next speaker. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Iryna Shurkhno, so the head of the Department of Pre-Trial Investigation in criminal proceedings on domestic violence in Prosecutor General Office. And here probably I will ask you a very short question about coordination, because you are one of very few institutions where you have clear instructions about coordination. You coordinate the work of law enforcement. You have to cooperate with the police. And I would like to ask you about this cooperation, how you see it, whether you believe it is effective and whether it brings result, and how do you cooperate with other stakeholders which are present here, with funds, civil society, because you don't coordinate their work, but they are really closely integrated in this work. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Yes, it's true. In our national legislation, it is stated that the Ministry of Social Policies, they coordinate, and then there is a law on prosecution, and we coordinate the work of law enforcement on combating crime. And we've been discussing different problems yesterday and today. We see that we need to work together to solve them. And that's the reason why we created the interagency working group, which includes all institution agencies engaged in combating domestic violence. And we also invited representatives of civil society organizations, international organizations, charity funds, which work in the area of assisting survivors of domestic violence. This group analyzes global issues, which requires the coordination of all stakeholders. For that, we developed a roadmap where we set strategic goals, operational goals, some small steps that we can make to achieve our strategic goals. I want to use this opportunity to thank all members of this working group, especially our partners, civil society organizations and international organizations. At this moment, we are developing curriculum for investigators and prosecutors and interviewers, because we discussed yesterday how we need to develop unified approaches and to train then our personnel to use them. Also, we are working on amendments to legislation according to the Istanbul Convention. And also, we are improving approaches on protecting survivors. Also, if we talk about, we are developing unified approaches to survivors in criminal proceedings. And now, in cooperation with civil society and international partners, we are developing these approaches because it is extremely relevant for the whole system of criminal justice. And I would like to state the problems. We have pretty good coordination on the central level, but we need to develop a model of this coordination on every level, on regional level, on local level. And we don't have clear vertical, where we can just direct what they do locally.
But we would also like the local level not to sit and wait till the central authorities will give them some guidance to understand what's their local situation. They should not, without waiting, organize the independent interaction with civil society organizations, with all the actors who battle domestic violence. Because if we take from experience, we'll take small residential areas, the police officers and even prosecution don't know where do they redirect the affected people after they come to the police. Who in their region provides assistance, social, psychological. There's no such information for them. So therefore, it's reasonable to go through monitoring and mapping of the NGOs and charity funds that provide assistance in their territory and organize some kind of interaction with them, with the police regionally. Also, as was mentioned before, and yesterday and today, and we stated again, that unfortunately a big problem that we have not enough centers for former offenders. So assistance to such people there is provided only for victims. No centers for perpetrators. When the domestic violence happened and the perpetrator has nowhere else to live, and who is removed from the house, the affected people, the wife and the child, and they are relocated to social facilities. Another urgent need is in designing programs battling domestic violence with the necessary steps in mind. And programs that were designed before, they need to be corrected now with the target audiences changed. The military, people returning from the captivity, people with disabilities, all of them should be covered by the program. Because the template programs that exist now for perpetrators don't account for all the individual peculiarities that I listed. Another concern is the enforcing the restrictive action. Just yesterday we've heard from law enforcement that this is a problem, the restrictive action to be used as one of the factors for prevention of further domestic violence. But when we see restrictive action, there is no one to enforce that for the perpetrators, unfortunately. And sometimes it just remains unenforced. So when in Lviv region, where there was no enforcement of the ruling over a perpetrator who was beating his wife and children, there was no restrictive action because there was no staff in the community to deal with that. Similar cases in Zakarpattia, Iryna, Dnipro, and several such occasions. Another example for you to understand how important is coordination of everyone. For instance, there comes a person to the police about the domestic violence. So it's a woman, doesn't work. She's bringing five children. She's economically dependent on the husband who is abusing alcohol and resorts to violence. The woman goes to police. Police registered the complaint, do pre-court investigation, but in this moment she doesn't find support because she doesn't know where to go, and the police officers don't know who can help her. So she doesn't eventually feel any assistance from the state. She understands that she has to go back to that perpetrator to suffer the domestic violence. And in that moment, if you could take the victim to support that as a social service or a charity fund, and if they relocated that woman with a child to a social apartment, provide some shelter, accommodate children to the kindergarten, provide some space to work, to be economically independent from that toxic husband, then she would have perceived the state as assistant, and the whole pretrial investigation would not be in vain, because in such cases usually the woman either drops charges or under the pressure from the perpetrator they change their testimony before or after the pre-court investigation, and that whole work was in vain. So it's very timely when some part of this mechanism falls out. The mechanism either fails entirely or partially. Just as well, coordination of all the agents and actors in battling domestic violence, and the assistance should be provided to protect the rights of the affected person, so that person would feel themselves protected and would trust the law enforcement. So that's why we need effectively to cooperate and work, do some teamwork. So I would like to also stress, we've heard that there are coordination councils at the territorial communities. It would be great if they were not just formal agencies, but really help people affected by violence. Thank you. I want to warn our audience that after all the interventions, we'll have a discussion as well. So please note your questions. And I like that many presenters mention each other in one way or another, and maybe look at each other with some hope that, we need your assistance, we need your support, and we'll get back to this after all the interventions in this panel discussion. I would like to now give the next speaker, Katerina Shpyrka, President of La Strada, Ukraine. My question to you is such, because you're not within the state authority, but you're one of the first responders. You're very close to the affected people. You're very deeply integrated into these processes. that the state authorities mentioned. So what is it from your point of view? Is this important work that you're doing? Are you being heard when you talk about it? Are you being heard when you mention the problems and challenges? Are there any problems of successful cooperation? Is it more visible from your independent or more independent position, the challenges that we talk about? Thank you, Roman. I would like to say first that among the parties present in this panel discussion, because cooperation with all the structures and organizations and institutions present here is it's very effective, and it's long-standing. If we talk about interaction, coordination in general, it's very important, of course. We understand very well that in cases of gender-based violence and general domestic violence, sexual violence in peaceful time or in the wartime, they are very aggravated and difficult and require complex solutions, which it would be possible only to apply when there's cooperation between different actors. Of course, civil society organizations has some it has some benefits, but it also has some limitations, just as state authorities also have their limitations. So we understand all too well that often from civil society organizations, you can often see where affected people would rather call hotline or anonymous hotline or go to some kind of support center, but they would never go to state authority. And in that case, civil society organizations who help and other first responders, they can be the entry point in providing assistance, helping to work with other actors, of course, the national police, prosecution, social services, and it's highly important. If we talk about interaction and cooperation, La Strada has been around for more than 25 years. Over this period, there were different stages of cooperation. In some points, in some instances, there were more streamlined, sometimes more difficult, but always among the key institutions of state authority and the key stakeholders, there's always understanding of importance of cooperation. There's always been this. And if we talk about coordination, coordination is important not only to achieve the end goal. Of course, it is important to provide assistance, to provide access to justice, but even before that affected person gets all these services, to minimize the traumatization, to minimize the challenges and the gaps, as Iryna said, that can lead to person refusing to further cooperate. And so that on all these stages there is this support. It's very important. Just as well, I would like to note that another important thing to note when we talk about interaction, when we talk about interaction, it's important to remember for whom and for what purpose do we coordinate and cooperate. Therefore, of course, putting the victim in the highest priority is, of course, what civil society can advocate more, can focus more on, and it's a very important thing. If we talk about coordination, why coordination is important? With the challenges in mind that the large-scale invasion takes in resources and depletion of resources for the police officers, social workers, everyone. I'm not even talking about armed forces, but resources, material, financial, and so that's what consolidation of work, to avoid duplication, to avoid wasting human resources, time resources. It's important to join in, to exchange information, to understand how we can strengthen each other, as civil society. So that's what allows us to optimize the resources and be more effective. Talking more about cooperation and coordination and interaction between state authority, civil society. Of course, it can and it is happening on different levels. We can talk about large-scale education promo campaigns, which is expressed in the national police and cooperation with others. It's also cooperation during the filing proposals to design some legal acts, amending the existing legal framework, including everyone, all the law enforcement and the education, etc. So all the related parties. As Ruslan said, and thank you for mentioning that, was the example of practical cooperation with civil society organization, specifically in this sphere for the best interest of affected people, victims of domestic violence, so for them to understand that they're not alone in that, and real examples of interaction with the general prosecution, especially in cases of sexual violence because of the war, referral, cooperation. So all these positive examples that are there, and they are important. Naturally, we were talking about this yesterday and today during the session about the deoccupied territories, that in fact there's a big cooperation streamlined on the central level, but it doesn't always mean that locally there's also this kind of cooperation. And when we do trainings for 911 operators talking to different regions, like there's a limited information about the different structures present, because there are maybe mobile brigades and nobody or not many people know that they are these mobile brigades. So who's there, who's working? So strengthening each other's capacity in community and local level is highly important. And another important thing to note is that when we talk about coordination and interaction and procedures and policies and the legal frameworks that have to regulate how we work, how we interact, it's still very important to remember and include the elements that would be aimed at understanding the complexity and the seriousness of acts connected to GBV and domestic violence. Because even if we built these elaborate algorithms, but if people whose job is to respond don't understand the problem, if they don't understand why is it the GBV is a problem, so that's why competencies for people is important. And just a couple of more words. Considering the difficult times we're going through, because of the war, and of course this is thanks to Istanbul Convention ratification, we understand that it's a lengthy process, but there are a number of steps to be made, and there is quite a lot of possible interaction for us. And civil society should be engaged informally because they have the experts, they have trust of the people and the affected populations. They understand the challenges that the affected population faces in reality, and also capitalizing on their experience of public organizations, state authorities who work locally, collecting the feedback, using it to improve some things, to streamline some things in the existing algorithms. It's very important because coordination and interaction should be multilateral. It's important to collect feedback. So that's a short version. It's a complex topic, and I would be ready to answer your questions. All right, thank you, Katerina. Thank you for sharing some questions regarding understaffing, training, and we see that it's a problem, but we move towards education, we move toward training new employees, and thanks to your organization for the support and for supporting the public agencies in this. In the end, we would like to get back to the question that for these 25 years, which progress do you see? When was it the best in your mind? So now I would like to give you the next speaker, Vasyl, who's Deputy Director on Programming Issues in Ukrainian Foundation of Public Health. I know you're also engaged in this cooperation. You coordinate both in the public sector, and you have bigger dialogue or wider dialogue with public authorities. I'd like to know your view. How do you see this coordination? Is it effective or not? Do you see positive changes or not? And how specifically do you support processes that the government is launching and coordinating in terms of victim-centric approach? Thank you, Roman, and thank you, colleagues. And greetings to all the panelists. In fact, the issue of coordination, when we talk about protecting GBV victims and their support, protection is the most important, and everybody mentioned that. Public authorities, civil society, and it's when we talk about example of Ukrainian Foundation of Public Health and these victim-centered approaches for us, we are always victim-centered. Because we not only say that there should be access to justice, there should be complex or holistic assistance that is based in psychosocial assistance, access to medical services, access to shelters, safe spaces, and just as well equal treatment. It's not a secret for anyone that from the very start of the large-scale invasion, people affected by gender-based violence have been facing more barriers in access to that assistance. For instance, if we talk about most recent cases in coordination, there was a lady contacting us who lived under occupation for a long time in Chernihiv. And when it was deoccupied, she had a problem having no documents, and public shelters are not always ready to help them with safe shelter, especially if it's about social housing. So we managed to help her and engage the local authorities to help her both restore the documents and so that she could have access to other services. And also the coordination is happening on several levels. As one of the speakers said, on this level there's a great coordination. So there are coordinational councils, but often, they exist on paper only, and they often are too formal, and they forget to include public or civil society organizations who work in this area. But just as we were working in since 2014, where active warfare didn't start for long, we had great examples how mobile brigades, how specialized services whose operation was held by foundations, coordinational councils, not even on the oblast level, but locally, and that helped to turn this mechanism on time quickly. We had some cases where this kind of cooperation lasted for several months and only in preparation in order to rescue the affected person and prepare her for terminating relations with the perpetrator, because perpetrator was a soldier in the armed forces of Ukraine. And so we understand that before if we properly respond as the law dictates, we can have much more negative impact on the victim and her children. So first we did the coordination, the preliminary stage, the preparation, and then we designed an action plan together with the victim, together with the civil society organizations. We found a place where she could be redirected, and only after that, that interaction stage started officially when she finally contacted the law enforcement. And as Catherine said, it's so important to have service mapping. We all know that the laws might say that locally there should be a coordinator who will be dealing with domestic violence prevention and GBV. And so the problem here was that in each agency there must be such appointed person. But if we look at the healthcare, and healthcare also has to be included, often it's a gap. Because locally people don't know about it, and we know we need to improve coordination with healthcare systems so that they could easier identify and focus on GBV victims and redirect them, refer them timely, because we are mandated to inform the national police, to inform the social services about the assistance provided to the victim. But we still do have a small gap that in the future we will be able to resolve through general synergy. And why is it important to cooperate for everyone on every level? Because only thanks to the synergy, cooperation and interaction that is written in the law, that still has to begin working practically. We have to be as one clockwork mechanism. Because if one part fails, the entire clock stops. And that's the process of interaction in helping the GBV victims. Each of us plays this important role. And I hope that in the nearest future, we will be able to do it all together so that it's timely and really victim-centered. Not only, to chase them and give them a good time, as we would say, but really be individually victim-centric. Because when we chase statistics, we only see numbers, but behind each number, there is a life of a person, and often the future actions of children that will build our country in times to come. Thank you. I think I have a counter question to you while we still remember it's about public healthcare establishments. What is their response when the victims, the GBV victims, come to them? Can they really identify these things? Do they know what to do with it later? Whom to talk to? Will they? Will the other side listen to doctors? Thank you, Roman.
Over the past year, we've been working on raising awareness of doctors and their expertise on how they should respond to domestic violence. It all depends on the region, whether there is political will, how to respond in these cases. Quite often we hear that they are trying to avoid responsibilities. So healthcare system, they can state that cases of violence, that's social issues, so social services should deal with them. And they forget that they are also a very important element on providing assistance. Whether everyone knows how to respond? No. Whether every healthcare institution has a responsible person for documenting and coordination? No. In many cases, they never even heard that there is an order of the Ministry of Healthcare 278 that they are obliged to do so. So here we need to raise their awareness, how to identify, because sometimes they see a broken arm or some bruises, and the person says that they fell down, so they just put a cast on or bandages, and that's enough. And they don't pay attention that this is not the first time a person comes with some injuries. And when we talk about violence as a part of public health, because in the whole world, violence is a part of public health system. We are saying that we need to raise awareness of medical professionals and all medical professionals, nurses and doctors, and the heads of healthcare institutions. They all need to understand why this topic is important for healthcare, and why it is important to notice this violence in order to prevent all the further consequences. And work in this area has started. There are trainings. So the management clinic how to work with victims of rape. Then also there are trainings on post-contact treatment, and also about preventing HIV post-contact or other medication. But it's rolling out in the country, but there is resistance. But this resistance we can overcome if the majority will have gone through training and understand why it's important. I think we found one more stakeholder into this discussion, because I'm sure we'll have discussions like this again. We need to invite representatives of state healthcare institutions. Now I'm giving the floor to the final panelist, Olena Trapeznikova, Senior Coordinator of Projects of the Embassy of Canada to Ukraine. First of all, I personally and on behalf of all my friends and colleagues, we want to thank Canada for all the support for many years. And the question is, why do you think that this area is important? Why you support these initiatives? And when you do support certain initiatives, do you focus on coordination and cooperation of all institutions and agencies? And maybe you can also share some Canadian experience in this regard. And the same question that I asked Ms. Katarina, so have you noticed any progress over many years of you being present in Ukraine? Thank you very much, Roman. Good afternoon, dear colleagues and participants. I will try to structure my answer and focus on 3 aspects. So I will answer all your questions. First of all, if we talk about more global perspective, Canada is a leader on eradication of internalized violence over the past 20 years. So GBV violence. So unfortunately, GBV violence is present in any society, any state, and anyone can become a victim. So Canada puts a lot of efforts into norms, standards on GBV on global level. And we are advocating and encouraging other states to respect human rights. GBV, as it has been mentioned before, is a systemic issue, and we need to have comprehensive approach to combat it and to have a survivor-centered approach. And that's one of the priorities of feminist policy of international support of Canada. And we are supporting this comprehensive support on preventing sexual and GBV violence. And of course, the work of Canada all over the world focuses on systemic and high-quality assistance to survivors and victims. And of course, it's impossible to do without coordination, cooperation of all stakeholders, agencies and institutions which are engaged in these processes. Also, Canada believes that service providers in the area of GBV, including civil society, they need to have good assistance with access to information, trainings, financial resources. For 2 years, Canada increased Canada tripled the investment in eradicating GBV and domestic violence all over the world. About our experience, as I mentioned, that GBV is a problem for Canada as well. About our policies on effective coordination and cooperation of all institutions and agencies inside the country, Canada funds a lot in order to build innovative tools for prevention and combating. Of course, there is system of coordination, but it is complicated due to the size of the country. Of course, there are certain marginalized and vulnerable groups. A year ago, in November 2022, there was the first national plan on eradication of GBV. This 10-year document, this is a strategy framework which describes coordination, cooperation of key stakeholders in prevention and response on different levels of jurisdiction and different sectors in order to provide maximum services for survivors and their families. And only because there is close cooperation of all levels of government, also cooperation of indigenous people. You know that it's a special vulnerable group in Canada, and Canada puts a lot of efforts into protecting their rights. We engaged lawyers, service providers, survivors. So we worked all together, and only this way we could develop this big strategy document. And Canada puts a lot of efforts into cooperation with civil society organizations, as Ms. Katarina mentioned today, because it is important to use the expertise of civil society for developing policies and other effective mechanisms, because as Canada, like Ukraine, is a big country, so civil society organizations, they have unique expertise about the needs in certain region, about the needs of certain vulnerable groups. For that reason, Canada engages civil society organizations in all areas, and that's why Canada cooperates with Ukrainian civil society as well. About Ukraine, we have been supporting Ukraine for many years in fighting and preventing GBV. And of course, Canada, for many years, we have been advocating a survivor-centered approach, and everything that Canada does in this area, they are survivor-centered. Also, we have interagency approach, and the projects that we support, they work on different levels. On local levels, we support local teams, cities, and try to solve local problems. We cooperate with national level government institutions, including Ministry of Internal Affairs, National Police, and civil society organizations. And of course, Canada for many years has been helping Ukraine in developing a concept of coordination, cooperation of all institutions and agencies. But at the same time, we constantly monitor the gaps and where more support is necessary. We support Ukraine in the area of responsibility for committing this crime. So we support Ukraine in survivor-centered approach during investigation and trial. Also, prevention of sexual violence and GBV during the war. We support the Special Representative of Secretary General of the UN as a part of cooperation with the government of Canada. And our many-year experience shows that Ukrainian society has made substantial progress about access to comprehensive services for victims, and we need to speak about this, not only about problems. At the same time, we understand that high-quality, comprehensive assistance is impossible without effective coordination, because Without this cooperation, the services cannot be provided. If we focus on some positive changes, of course, it's updated legislation, creating centers and services like day centers, shelters, mobile teams, psychosocial support, special departments of the police, and all the positive shift in their work. Also access to free legal aid, first and second level, also access to health care, and we also try to support this special medical assistance post-contact. We also see some challenges in coordination and in the area of survivor-centered approach. So based on our analysis and the analysis of the UN agency, it says the access to services is not equally distributed on the territory of the country, because in some communities there are no specialized services, in some communities there are no services at all. In some services, their assistance is too fragmented because it doesn't lead. It's problematic because it doesn't lead to real help to this person, and it's not a human-centered approach. Also, the response has to be improved, and unfortunately, not always survivor-centered approach is used. And still, standards need to be implemented and improved. Another aspect which I would like to highlight, that's coordination and cooperation on prevention, especially the repeated cases. So we see that there is better work, and that's the work of national police and cooperation with courts. So if the cases are complicated, we analyze them, and we can see that coordination can be better. So at least it's important to start with identifying certain gaps and certain issues to improve the mechanism overall. And all speakers today have mentioned that on national level, if we analyze the situation, we see a lot of positive changes in coordination and cooperation. But if we go down to the level of regions, the situation is different. And as I've mentioned, that services are not equally distributed. And so the government of Canada, when we support certain projects, we try to have balanced approach so that all citizens of Ukraine could have access to these services, and we help Ukraine to analyze this distribution. About local level, unfortunately, when we work UNFP, we try to analyze this coordination system on local level. Unfortunately, we notice that there is no systemic coordination cooperation. So something exists. They report about something, but it's not systemic. Either they don't have algorithm how to coordinate and cooperate, or the referral system does not work. We often hear that the focal points in healthcare institution or in education system, formally they exist, but they don't really work, and they don't send up any information about possible cases of domestic violence. Also, if we talk about feedback with survivors. Sometimes it's not even clear for people who are supposed to do it that what they need to do. And if locally, if we help Ukraine create these interagency systems, when communities when communities create a network of specialized services, and at the same time they create coordination system. When they clearly define mandates, they define algorithm of referrals for victims. They create coordination councils. I can name a few cities where these coordination councils work really well, and we try to scale up these pilots in all other municipalities. And this is definitely a topic for a separate discussion because we need. I cannot talk. I would like to say a few words about children and special services for them, but I cannot talk too long. But what I can say to sum up, now, as never before, there is a lot more coordination. We see some optimistic consequences of our support, and Canada will keep supporting Ukraine. And one more positive aspect is that recently, both government and local authorities have been funding this area, and with real funding, yes, so not just as a formality, and it guarantees sustainability of the services, because donors, international organizations cannot support everything constantly. And one of the examples, in a small town in Ukraine, and there was not enough money to establish this system of specialized services. They didn't have enough money. Through negotiations and coordination, it was possible to create it. Partly the money was coming from national government, partly from local government, and partly from the government of Canada. And we all took on certain responsibility on sustainability. And that's a good example how this coordination cooperation can lead to positive consequences, even if you don't have money. Thank you very much. Thank you. You raised really interesting issues that it's good to discuss. It's wonderful that there are models in Ukraine which were created in Ukraine by Ukrainians with support of international partners that we can scale up. We know that resources are not equally distributed, and here we talk about human resources, for example, big cities in comparison to smaller ones. The resource of trainings, maybe people in big cities, they have more access, but small communities don't have this access. But then we see success stories. And you have success stories of every agency institution. And it's okay to name these towns and cities if we know that they have good stories. And if we know where these success stories are, then we can learn from them and scale up for the whole territory of the country. And it's important to understand that civil society in Ukraine, international donors, they help and they launch, but only government institutions can guarantee sustainability. And I heard that there are certain gaps if we talk about healthcare and education, and I hope that these gaps are going to be improved. We have some time for questions. If the audience has any questions, over to you. I don't see the audience that well because I'm blinded by the projector, but please stand up. And while you are collecting your thoughts, maybe social services. Maybe you can comment on education and healthcare. Yes, of course we know about this issue and we are working on that, because when we talk about comprehensive system, we need all stakeholders to understand what GBV is and which factors and features we should use to identify it. And for that reason, we are cooperating with Ministry of Healthcare and Ministry of Education to develop some unified curriculum. First of all, with for medical professionals, because usually victims come to them and they need to be able to identify. And so, but here we do need assistance of civil society and international donors so that we can develop this unified, comprehensive training program. And then we hope that we will cover all medical professionals who will work with survivors in the future. It's great that you're already doing something in this direction. Any questions from the audience? We can talk forever. I can talk forever about this topic without questions. But if I conclude, yes, we have central level, we have great ideas, we have great cooperation, but in regions there is lack of communication. Even among your institutions and departments, they don't cooperate as well as you do. So maybe you already have some algorithm that can be presented to all regions so that everybody acts together, so that they know who they can or should cooperate. If there are partners, international organizations or civil society, if you know that they are represented locally, you can recommend your local departments to cooperate with them. And it's important that this cooperation should not be just a formality, because we know what statistics is, and sometimes that it cannot really beneficial for beneficiaries. And we can support, truly support survivors only if we provide real services, not just collect statistics. So it is important to develop this algorithm, or find this algorithm, and make regions to follow this. And then again, we have this context and the war, and when the level of crime goes up, but also we will have post-war period, and the history indicates that the crime increases in post-war period. And of course, GBV or domestic violence might increase, and so if we only have response, then the system will become overloaded. So we need to develop some new models and focus on prevention. And of course, we need to respond in more effective manner. There was an issue of special shelters for offenders, because it is not fair when the offender can stay in the comfort of their own home, but the spouse and children having gone through terrible experience of violence, they need to leave their home and to live in shelters. So maybe we can think about this more. So we have time for just one question. Any questions? And we can wrap up then. Thank you very much for this conversation. And I hope that something will come out of this discussion, and I'm glad to hear that something is already being done.